Southern Cameroonians, Ambazonians, my dear brave warriors of our liberation movement. Today is the 30th of November in the year of our Lord 2019. My dear people, I bring you revolutionary greetings. On the 30th of November 2017, Mr. Paul Biya, reading from a script at the Nsimalen Airport in Yaoundé, La République du Cameroon, declared war on the sovereign people of the Southern Cameroons. Mr. Paul Biya launched an assault that would eventually develop in what we now see today, which is an ongoing genocide on civilians without arms. Mr. Paul Biya decided that it was time to decimate the people of the Southern Cameroons simply because the people rose to assert their freedom, because the people rose to ask for what truly belongs to them, because the people decided to remind not only Mr. Paul Biya, but the rest of the world that it was time. After several decades of colonization, recolonization, and dehumanization, it was about time that we live free as other sovereign peoples around the world. That is when Mr. Paul Biya decided, before the watchful eyes of the rest of the international community, to unleash mayhem on our people. At the moment I'm talking to you, over 400 villages have been scorched earth, have been razed to dust, have been reduced to ashes. Tens of people have been burnt alive in those homes. Babies, pregnant women, handicapped persons, even people who are mentally deranged have been shot at point blank and killed by soldiers of La République du Cameroon with impunity on our territory. My dear people, on this very sad anniversary, I'd like to bring you good news. There are moments when people ask, can there be good news when a lot are still dying? Can there be good news when there is total chaos on our land? Can there be good news when we have over 1.5 million people internally displaced and over 700,000 people living as refugees around the world? Can there be good news? Can there be good news when people live in constant fear? Can there be good news when people no longer know if they will see the next day when they go to bed? Can there be good news when people don't even know whether they will have what to eat the next day when they go to bed? My dear people, in every dark cloud, I go for the silver lining. Let me tell you where the good news is. The good news is located in what a lot of us have already qualified very bad news. Last week, or let me say this week, the Secretary General of the Commonwealth of Nations, the Secretary General of the Organisation Internationale de la Francophonie, and the Chairman of the African Union Commission visited Mr. Paul Biya in Yaoundé. At the end of their discussions, they issued a statement. That statement generally, which seemed so diplomatic in nature, generally indicated that they did not consider the so-called Grand National Dialogue as having attained the objective of what they believe should be inclusive discussions. According to that statement, they came across as indicating that they would want greater reforms to be taken that will lead to more openness and give people greater autonomy in the management of their own affairs. According to their statement, the overall objective is a search for peace. But in that statement, two words stood out clear for me. They said it is important to address the root causes, to address the root cause of the ongoing conflict. My dear people, in discussions with some of our brethren, they say, oh, Mr. Kuro, why do you think that when they talk of root cause, they are really referring to what to what we all know? And I laughed. I said, even if they did not mean it, those words did not come in by error. What is the root cause of the ongoing conflict? Will they say the root cause is because things were not going on well? No, 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 my dear people. That is why we need to pick up that statement and return it to them. Just like when we pray to our God, we take his words in the Bible back to him. That is why we should now take those two words back to these organizations and remind them what the root cause of this conflict is. We must let them know that the root cause of the ongoing genocide in the southern Cameroons is not about issues of governance. We must remind them that the root cause of the ongoing massacre of the people of the southern Cameroons is not about the absence of democracy. We must remind them that the root cause of the ongoing carnage on our people is not about an issue of over-centralization. No, 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 no. My dear people, we must take this opportunity, take their words back to them and remind them that the root cause of the ongoing genocide in the southern Cameroons is black to black, neighbor to neighbor colonization. Yes, that it is a result of the Bosch decolonization of the southern Cameroons that rather led to La République du Cameroun taking advantage of the unfortunate and, I should say, reckless pullout of the British colonial administration that gave room for Mr. Ahidjo to march in with his army of occupation and re-annex the southern Cameroons. We must remind the world that the root cause of the ongoing conflict is about a stolen country called the southern Cameroons that needs to be restored to the rightful owner. This is the message we should continue to pound on their faces. This is the message we should take to them, brandishing back to them the words they themselves used. My people, they might never have intended to say that the root cause of this conflict is a territorial conflict, that it is the recolonization of the southern Cameroons by her neighbor, La République du Cameroun, that got its independence on the 1st of January 1960. We must remind them this, my dear people. Mr. Paul Biya himself, from his own lips, said it in Paris, that when they offered, and we went through the United Nations through a referendum or a plebiscite organized on the 11th of February 1961, that we were going to acquire our independence by joining the already independent La République du Cameroun in a federation of two states equal in status. They actually were coyly coming in because they knew they had numerical advantage, because they knew they had an army that we did not have, because they knew they had a backer in La République Française. And so they were eventually going to overpower us, brainwash us, assimilate us all together, and completely wipe out our colonial heritage. My dear people, we will not accept to be completely wiped out in that nature. So this is why I'm saying Mr. Paul Biya admitted in France, and just on the heels of that public admission of the intention of La République du Cameroun to not only colonize us, but assimilate us all together, these three organizations have come in to remind the world that there is a root cause to this conflict. And which root cause? We all know. Which root cause? We all need to keep sensitizing the world about very seriously. This is what this is all about, my people. Some people will ask, what country are you saying has been stolen? What country are you talking about? And Mr. Kuro, why do you think on this day we should change our message to that of reminding Mr. Paul Biya and the world that Mr. Paul Biya, you must pull out your colonial administration and army of occupation from our territory? You say, why? I say, it is simple. I read Justice or Chief Justice, retired Chief Justice Aya Paul Abine define what a country is all about. And he reminded the world that we meet all the criteria. Because first, yeah, to be a country, you need to have a territory. Do we have a territory? Yes, we have it. We have internationally recognized boundaries. The pillars are still there. I'm sure you have seen pictures of those pillars circulating all over the place. The pillars are still there. And this boundary is recognized because the documents indicating these boundaries are lying in the offices of the United Nations organizations in New York. So we have a territory, yes. The next, are we a people? Yes, we are a people, because the African Union's Human Rights Court in the Banjul in 2009 ruled that Southern Cameroonians are a people. So we have a territory. We are a people. The only thing left is a government. Why do we want La République du Cameroun to pull out its colonial administration as well as its army of occupation? Because we want to take back our country, sit in that country, and democratically elect our government, elect leaders of our government, put in place a government, go ahead to define our development priorities, and begin to develop our country. That is the message I am bringing to you today. That is the message I'm sharing this day. That anytime we talk, we should remind Mr. Paul Biya and the world, La République du Cameroun, pull out your colonial administration and army of occupation from our territory. We must not be shy in doing so. Because some people say, why should we be saying something that seems unrealistic? Oh my goodness. My dear people, the devil only listens to hard language. The devil doesn't listen to romantic language. The devil does not understand diplomatic language. If that were happening, we will already have Yaoundé doing other than what they are doing today. But the devil only listens to hard language. Tell him what it is. How will you go about this and why? It's like a neighbor gets up one morning and encroaches into your land completely, takes over your piece of land. What do you need to do? You have to come out and say, please pack and leave this property. It does not belong to you. The noise you make will attract neighbors who will come in. And these neighbors will begin to ask questions about what is happening. And they will be told that someone is encroaching on another person's property. And if these neighbors like justice, if these neighbors like peace, they will know that there will only be peace if justice is done. And so they will ask, can each of you show proof of ownership of this territory? Can each of you show proof of ownership of this property? And that is when justice will come in. My dear people, this is why in our messaging, every day, we must say it very loud, as often as possible. Mr. Paul Biya, pull out your colonial administration and army of occupation from the southern Cameroons. Pull out your colonial administration and army of occupation from our territory. Now, let me address this discussion that I followed on ABC TV anchored by Comrade Chris Anew with Dr. Rebecca Tinsley. Madame Tinsley made a lot of remarks which have been taken by the enemy to try and use and discourage our people. To tell our people, Madame Tinsley has said, nobody is interested in the root cause. Nobody wants you to talk about your history. Can you imagine that? Nobody wants to hear about your history. They want to hear only about your present and your future. Yes, this is not by error. Such people are prompted to come to us to try and make us understand that we must forget about our roots. But my dear people, we have people in the United States of America whose great-great-grandparents were brought in as slaves, but who until today continue to go back to the African continent to search their roots, to know where they are coming from. And in the modern world, somebody tells us to forget about our roots. Somebody tells us that no, we should only talk about the abuse of human rights, we should only talk about problems of governance and the like. Let me bring to you this message. Let me bring to you this good news. My dear people, when Elijah, who had prayed to make sure there will be no rains in the territory, and came around now, after 3 years of drought, to pray for the return of the rains, Elijah stood to the king and he had prayed all day. And he kept sending his boy to go and look in the horizon and see if cumulonimbus clouds were gathering. By late afternoon, after about the 7th visit to look onto the clouds, the young man told him, I could see some little clouds gathering, perhaps just about the size of a baby's hand. And when Elijah heard about that, he told the king, mount your horse and begin running on top speed, because I am announcing torrential rains. And indeed, it was torrential rains. That hope was too tiny to mean anything. If you believe that the words you see in the Bible are true, then you will not discount the fact that when God instructs, even the devil obeys. That is why Mr. Paul Biya had to find himself on a panel discussion in France to be reminded by Mr. Mo Ibrahim that although you are president of the republic somewhere, seated here you are equal with us. That's why he had to bring him from his high horse. It didn't happen by mistake. That is why Mr. Mo Ibrahim was used by God to squeeze those words out of Mr. Paul Biya for him to tell the world that the mission of La République du Cameroon was to assimilate, was to annex completely and reformat the brains of the people of the southern Cameroons. My dear people, when God instructs, even the devil obeys. This is the time for us to know that such kind of messages of discouragement have no place. I recall when South Africans were demonstrating over and over and over for the end of apartheid, that they will not continue to be ruled by a minority. Nobody doubts that the British government was a serious backer of the apartheid government in South Africa. I recall watching Margaret Thatcher over and over and over, making nonsense of all of the efforts of the people of South Africa. But when the hour of God came, the same people who said it will never happen announced it, that it happened. The same people who said black people will never rule their own country, South Africa, have been the same people proclaiming the same Mandela they refer to as a terrorist, as one of the greatest human beings of our times. My dear people, we have been through that before. Anytime they tell you it is not possible, tell them we have heard that before. This is the time for each and every one of us, wherever we are, to gird our loins and get ready to take the final sprint. We must get Mr. Paul Biya, his colonial administration, and his army of occupation marching out of our territory, whether they like it or not. The time of victory is close. I have said it over and over and over. And people say he is now talking like a preacher. But my dear people, the news that I bring to you is that it only happens in the physical because it has been decided in the spirit. And the freedom of the people of the southern Cameroons has been decided in the spirit. Mr. Paul Biya is not going to die, because a lot of people say he's so finished he can crash at any moment. Until the southern Cameroons is freed, Mr. Paul Biya is not going to die. God has kept him there to use his foolishness. God has kept him there to use his deficiencies, to use his hard-heartedness, to use his cold blood to free the people of the southern Cameroons. Mr. Paul Biya will continue to do only those things that will lead to our freedom. You must believe it. You must work for this freedom. You must arise today and tell yourself, despite all the chaos, I am going to continue supporting this liberation movement and stand for it. My dear people, even as I speak, there is a minister of La République du Cameroun in the United States of America at the head of a delegation. Mr. Felix Mbayu, who is minister delegate at the Ministry of External Relations in charge of relations with the Commonwealth. He led a delegation to the United States of America to meet the U.S. Undersecretary for African Affairs, Mr. Thibault Nagy Jr. We all saw the pictures on social media, and everyone has talked about this and saying they have come to beg about the plans by the United States of America to get Cameroon out of the list of the privileged African countries benefiting from the African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA. They say after making a lot of noise, after claiming they don't care because the volumes of trade involved are quite minimal, they have come to beg. My dear people, the true purpose of that visit is not AGOA. AGOA is only a side issue. The elephant in the house is that after shouting at the rooftops, after making all the noise, after cursing the United States of America, after threatening even the life of the U.S. ambassador to Cameroon, after threatening even the life, of course, we saw Banda Kani do that on television, after threatening even the life of the U.S. Undersecretary for African Affairs, Thibault Nagy Jr., after insisting that they were going, their army was going to crush the army of the United States if they ever dared intervene. Mr. Paul Biya's government has suddenly come to terms with the fact that beginning tomorrow, the 1st of December 2019, the United States of America takes over the presidency of the UN Security Council. Recall, La République du Cameroon has boasted over and over and over that they have created a firewall around the United States, around the UN Secretariat General, because they say Mr. Antonio Guterres is a very close friend to Mr. Paul Biya, that Mr. Antonio Guterres is at the beck and call of Mr. Paul Biya, that Mr. Paul Biya does everything to take care of all the business needs and the likes of Mr. Antonio Guterres. So they have built a firewall, and nothing about Southern Cameroons will ever be brought onto the floor of the UN General Assembly. But today, they are frightened. Why are they frightened? Because France, their ally, has reminded them that the French will not risk any veto at the UN Security Council if the US decided to table a serious motion concerning the Southern Cameroons. Because the relations between France and La République du Cameroon are not worth France messing up its relationship with the United States. So they cannot dangle their veto. It is also because they have come to terms with the fact that China, since the creation of the UN Security Council, has only used its veto power twice, and those are on extremely serious issues, not matters as trivial as protecting a dictatorial regime like that of Mr. Paul Biya in Africa. They have also come to the realization that Russia, on whom they were counting, has been the first country, through its foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, to announce that in 2020, the United Nations must go back to complete the decolonization file, because there's still a lot of people around the world living under colonial administration, which is unacceptable. That decolonization has not been completed. And because 2020 is an anniversary relating to decolonization, all the pending files, all those countries that still live under colonial rule, their situations must be looked into. That is why Mr. Paul Biya now realized it made sense to come down from the high horse, run on the knees, run to the United States of America and begin to beg, and begin to say this, and begin to make offers. My dear people, the real elephant in the house is not AGOA, because Mr. Paul Biya doesn't care whether people do business or they don't do it. They have suddenly seen their so-called firewalls breaking into pieces. That is why they are running. Even as I speak to you, tomorrow, Sunday, the 1st of December, Mr. Felix Mbayu will be meeting in Maryland with some of our brethren. They've called some select brethren of the Southern Cameroon's liberation movements to talk to them. They say they want to dialogue, and I trust those are our brethren that are taking part at that meeting. We have said, no, We will not be running away from La République du Cameroon because they will say they are coming to take photographs with us to go tell the world that things are going fine. No, we are ready for negotiations at any time, but we will not negotiate out of fear. My dear people, we will remind La République du Cameroon at every given opportunity that they have to get their colonial administration and army of occupation out of our territory. Tell this over and over and over until the world gets used to this statement. That is the path to freedom. That is the way to the promised land that we are seeking. My dear people, before I end this message, let me inform our people who are back on the territory on ground zero. When agents of La République du Cameroon come running in churches, hospitals, markets, and everywhere and asking you to register your name on any list, give all your biodata because you are about to benefit from anything. You are about to benefit from anything coming from the United Nations relief agencies. Do not cooperate. Because if the United Nations wants to carry out some actions like that, they use their agents, not the administration of La République du Cameroon. They are planning fake elections around the corner. And so they are doing everything possible to gather names, put on lists, and they will vote for you. My dear people, this is the time for all of us to get wise. I think we have seen for ourselves that even the elections that La République du Cameroon is planning are doomed from day one. But we must continue the sensitization. I'd like to thank you for taking off this 30 minutes of your precious time to listen to this message. Even as I close, I will implore you, this liberation struggle needs your financial contributions. I will say it every other day, every other minute. Contribute by all means. Contribute to whoever you believe is using that money to carry out those peaceful actions that will result to Mr. Paul Biya's army of occupation leaving our territory. If it is CIDs you are buying, buy them. If it is the amber pins you are buying, buy them. If it is the bonds, the bonds that you are buying, buy them. If that's what you have opted for, buy them. If you also feel like contributing to the Ambazonia Relief Fund, I've talked about this over and over, contribute there even as we speak. My dear people, by all means, continue to support this liberation struggle. Freedom is coming. Freedom is coming soon. To God be the glory.